Donald Trump's latest order that slams the door shut on millions of citizens worldwide. Now, yesterday, he signed a presidential proclamation. Now, think of it like an official announcement. Some sweeping travel restrictions. It targets about 20 countries. And here's the kicker. Nearly half of them are from Africa. Here's the list. Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Libya, Somalia, Sudan. 7 African countries are facing a complete ban. It means that no one from these nations can enter the United States of America at any cost. There are partial restrictions as well. Burundi, Sierra Leone, and finally Togo. Visitors from these countries face certain prohibitions, but there will be certain exemptions. Say, for example, temporary work visas or athletes traveling for major sporting events. It's because of national security concerns. That's what the White House is saying. Citizens of these countries, among others, are potential threats to America's national safety.
Taking a live look at the intersection of Alondra and Atlantic Avenue, where there is now a car on fire in the middle of the intersection. Maybe about 100 or so protesters gathered around that intersection, and the LA County Sheriff's Department standing their ground where they have been for the better part of the morning and the afternoon, pushing the crowd further away from the 710 freeway as they continued their protest. Again, this all started this morning across the LA River near the Home Depot on Alondra, and then the crowd was pushed and eventually mostly dispersed. These are basically the few that are left, the stragglers, if you will, who have continued to remain in the streets protesting the actions and the presence of federal authorities in this neighborhood, and this has now resulted in a car fire. That ladder truck now pulling into the intersection. The crowd is standing back.
Welcome to Pan-African Perspectives, your weekly live stream where we talk about things pertaining to the continent of Africa, how it's impacting our people and the continent altogether. Things that we can do to improve our circumstances and the news of the day. I am coming at you live from Los Angeles, California. I'm in my hotel room right now. I'm in downtown Los Angeles, about a 5-minute walk away from what you just witnessed on your screen. So we're going to talk about that today because I've been here in downtown Los Angeles, and I can tell you what my experience has been being here in DTLA. And then we're also going to talk about what we talked about yesterday, but a little bit more about the specific restrictions and visa bans for specific African countries and how it impacts Africa as a whole. Yesterday, we talked about Sierra Leone. Today, we're talking about Africa. Now, before we get into those details, everybody, can you let me know that you can hear me and let me know where you're watching from? And also, you can also let me know how aware you are about what's going on here in Los Angeles, not too far away from where I am, and how aware you guys are of the travel bans and travel restrictions for African countries. I want to hear from you guys. Now, before we hear from you guys, because I know it's going to take a little while for those messages to come through, and just to make sure you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up so I know that you guys can hear me. We're going to talk a little bit about the travel ban and which countries are included. So this is a map to show you the number of countries in Africa that are on this travel ban and travel restrictions list. So again, more than half of the countries that were included on the travel ban/travel restrictions list are from Africa. Haiti's on the list, so you got Haiti in the Caribbean, and then they have some Asian and Middle Eastern countries. Okay, so we got Catherine Smith. You can hear me. You're watching from Texas. Okay, Tundo can hear me from South Africa. Nice, you guys are watching from South Africa. North Texas, always lady 510 from North Texas said she was quite aware of what's going on. Okay, cool. So we got a couple of folks saying that they could hear what was going on. The Feral Dreamer says, I can hear you. I'm from Bowling Green, Kentucky. All right, cool. So let's get into it, right? Let's talk about what's going on. And Amber Nicole says you can hear me too. So let's talk about it. I want to start with the travel ban because I think this is loosely related to, separate, but also part of the overall Trump administration, and how they're focused on what they're considering the immigration problem. An invasion of the United States is how they have described it previously. So, the latest travel ban went into effect on June 9th. That is today, June 9th, 2025. It imposes either full or partial entry restrictions on several African countries. So that's all we're focusing on right now. Now, the ban is part of a broader executive order targeting 19 nations, with a focus on Africa and Middle East. So as we mentioned, right, the list of the countries are as follows, that were completely and fully banned. And let me pull that up on the screen so you guys can actually see that. So that list includes Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, and Eritrea. Now, if you look at what the reasons were for Libya and Somalia, they said for terrorism, and vetting deficiencies or lack of government control. For Sudan, the reason is visa overstays, lack of vetting, and civil conflict. Chad, they said high visa overstay rates. Republic of Congo, high visa overstay rates. Equatorial Guinea, high visa overstay rates. And Eritrea is also what they say, no criminal records, refusal to accept deportees. So that's who all got the full ban. That means that no visas at all will be issued for really any exception from any of those first few countries that I mentioned. Now, there's a partial ban on Sierra Leone. If you want to know specifics of Sierra Leone, those of you who watch this live stream and are interested in Sierra Leone in particular, I did do a live stream yesterday on the specifics of Sierra Leone. So happy to, check that out. I mean, I would say check that out because I'm not going to go too much into the details of the specifics here. But they did say high visa overstay rates and refusal to accept deportees. I did speak to someone last Friday from the American Embassy in Sierra Leone, and these things are highly disputed, at least in terms of the refusal to accept deportees. The high visa overstay rates we talked about, you guys can check out that live stream from yesterday. Burundi and Togo are also on the partial ban list. So what does the partial ban look like? What does that include, right? And so now, many times, the partial ban really means bans on most visas like student visas, immigrant visas, exchange visas. Sorry, not immigrant visas. Sorry, student visas, exchange visas, K-1 visas, right? The fiance visa. Those visas tend to be the ones that they say have high overstay rates, and that is why they do not want to continue to allow people from those countries into the United States. So he cited several justifications for targeting African countries. His first is national security / terrorism. He said some countries are described as having a significant presence of terrorists or as lacking government control over their territory, which is said to increase the risk of terrorism. By the way, if you are seeking asylum from a country, you have to be able to prove those things that I just said in national security and terrorism in those countries. But why are these people not getting, asylum? That's a question that has to be answered by the government of the United States. Visa overstay rates is another reason. Several African countries that were included in this list is included because they have what they call high visa overstay rates, meaning many citizens remain in the U.S. beyond their visa expiration. I mentioned Sierra Leone in particular. The specific visa, the student visa, they say 35% of those who get a student visa overstay. That's specific to Sierra Leone. I only know that because I've spoken to people about Sierra Leone and we've gotten into those details. But other countries have their own rates of what they say is overstaying their visas. Then they say inadequate screening and vetting. So the White House claims that these countries do not meet U.S. standards for sharing criminal records, verifying identities, or vetting travelers. That is something that Sierra Leone in particular disputes across all three of those elements. But of course, the United States says otherwise. The next is refusal to accept deported nationals. Some countries, such as Eritrea and Sierra Leone, they say are accused of refusing to accept back their citizens who were removed from the United States. I mentioned this yesterday, in particular, in regards to Sierra Leone. There was a Haitian migrant that they tried to send to Sierra Leone because they probably confused them. Haiti and Sierra Leone are two completely different countries culturally. There are some similarities, of course, because we're all from of African descent, but these are, different countries. In fact, in Haiti, they speak a different Creole and they speak French, whereas in Sierra Leone, we speak Creole. So maybe that's the confusion. Who knows? But they tried to send a Haitian migrant to Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone did not accept or approve of that migrant to Sierra Leone, and many believe that that's the reason why they say they're refusing to take in their own citizens that were removed from the United States. And then civil conflict and instability, ongoing wars, and lack of stable governments is the reason for Somalia and Sudan. That's why they're cited in those bans. So that's what you see on screen here, right? You see here are the countries and here who is impacted. Now, I want to be very clear on what this means for these folks, right? So this means if this goes into effect today, let me tell you what I had been speaking to someone at the U.S. Embassy in Sierra Leone about on Friday. Each embassy was given notice on Friday that on Monday, if they have visas already set up and ready to deploy to individuals, those individuals will have to be in by a certain time on Monday. But most embassies have decided to just say you have to come in on Friday, from what I understand. Specifically in Sierra Leone, that's what happened. So if you were not around the capital city, where the United States Embassy is in that country, to go pick up your visa that day, the visa you paid for, that you applied for, that you were approved for, will not be issued to you. They will destroy those after today. All right. And likely, if you did not go Friday, you weren't even going to be able to pick them up today. So meaning the day they were notified, which, by the way, Friday was a holiday in many African countries because it was a Muslim holiday. Many people were notified on the day of. Now, the American embassy was supposed to be closed on Friday in Sierra Leone at the very least, in many other African countries, but it was reopened because this notification came in at midnight Friday morning, and they had to scramble to try to get people their visas. If you did not pick up your visa, again, they do not get those visas. So if they paid $180 for those visas, went through a process of making sure there was enough money in the bank account, they started making plans because they knew that they were being issued a visa. If they did not get that visa that day, they no longer can enter the United States. They no longer have that visa. That's over with. People who are in the United States currently on one visa, planning to move over to another visa, are likely not going to get issued that new visa. Visa renewals are likely to stop on a lot of these instances and occasions. Now, that's on people that are banned in general. That's not, and then also that includes people who are on the visa restrictions. So, this obviously is something that caught the attention of many people around the world because there are folks who are looking to get visas to go to the United States. I mentioned this yesterday. I'll mention it again here because this may be a different audience. I know four people personally in the last 12 months that have attempted to get a United States visa, and they did not get the visa and they were not told why. Now, I'm starting to understand why such few people were offered visas. They were already restricting visas, and this was under the Biden administration and the Trump administration, right? This is not exclusive to just the Trump administration. The reduction in the number of visas being allowed for countries like Sierra Leone and others is the fact that they say these countries overstay their visas when they get visas to come to the United States. right? That is their reasoning for offering that. So that is what they said, and that is the case, right? And that's part of Trump's broader immigration policy, right? He came in promising to the people who voted for him that he was going to eliminate and fix what he called the migrant problem. The invasion of the United States is the way he described it, right? And so that's what he said he was going to do on day one. I do believe that they have a lot harder time doing that than they realize because of how many people are who are undocumented, who are actually doing the work that Americans don't want to do. A lot of the hard labor, working many long hours in the hot sun, on construction sites, on farms, etc. These are not the types of labor that Americans generally are used to doing. And so in general, you have foreigners who do them, who get paid under the table for less money than what the minimum wage would be or a living wage for many others, and they work these jobs. Now, what the political right in America tends to do is, they're good at showing the enemy to those folks who they want to vote for them. And one of their enemies is the immigrant population. And they use a couple of things to describe them as their enemies. One is crime. Two is stealing your jobs. These are the two things that they use to describe immigrants as doing in the United States, right? Now, to be clear, there's all kinds of talks about, and there's talks about them getting specific special benefits, et cetera, which has happened in New York. You saw that many migrants were put into hotels for months on end, and so that had a lot of folks who are also immigrants but had gone through the legal process. They themselves ended up deciding to vote for Trump because they felt like the illegal immigrants were making them look bad, and they were getting negatively impacted by it. I don't think people are very aware, but there are Dominican populations, Puerto Rican populations in New York. There are Mexican populations in Texas, in California. There are Cuban populations in Florida, and all those groups everywhere. But that's just kind of the larger groups in those areas. Those groups in larger percentages than in history voted for Trump because of that reason I just described. Okay. There's also those from African communities that do the same thing. There are people who want to assimilate into the United States, and they feel that other people are making that more difficult for them. Now, it's up to you guys to decide whether you think they should care about assimilating and they should feel that way. But that is the reason why people vote for folks who are going to, quote unquote, solve the immigration problem, right? So now you have a situation where you have a president who has made these promises on the campaign trail and found that it's a little bit more challenging than he initially anticipated, quote unquote, solving this problem. So what can he do to show that he's solving the problem? He sent 3 planes to El Salvador, put them all in prison. 30% of those we know did have criminal records. The other 70%, they're not sure. And at least 3 of them were improperly sent there, right? We know that for sure. You do ICE raids, make them public. Excuse me. So that acts as a deterrent, right? Now, Africans, in this instance, in terms of these ICE raids, it seems that Africans, when they migrate to the United States, tend to work in different industries than what is happening for the folks from Latin America. And so they're not getting picked up as often in some of the new places that ICE raids have been happening. There was a Home Depot here in Los Angeles where there was an ICE raid that happened. And there was another organization, and I can't remember where there was because a lot of Latin American migrants will be at Home Depot looking for work. folks need somebody to put together that thing they bought from Home Depot, right? And instead of going to TaskRabbit or something like that, they will just get somebody from the parking lot. Or there are folks who are in the construction business who want to lower their cost of doing construction. So they will go to a Home Depot parking lot and they'll grab a bunch of folks, and they don't really care where they're from and if they have the right to work in the United States, right? So the ICE raids started happening in all kinds of different places, right? There's all kinds of anecdotal insight as to where they were happening, but we know for sure they've raided a couple of different things. Apparently, there was a kindergarten graduation, according to Piro Dusa. There are many, many instances where these raids have disrupted the daily lives of everyday people. This is really just what you can anticipate more of, though. So that leads us to what is happening in downtown LA and the riots as they're being described. So, I think instead of me trying to explain it, let me have those who've been reporting on this explain, and then I will give some commentary on the other side.
To this place, let's go ahead and put these images of unrest. These are all coming from last night out of LA County. Trump has, for the first time since 1992, federalized the National Guard. And this is the first time it's been federalized over the objections of the state governor for the first time since 1965. We're going to talk a lot about the legal pretext here. A lot of legal analysts say that this is illegal. Certainly Gavin Newsom is saying that this is illegal. But you can see here, this is just from last night. There were a bunch of Waymos that apparently they were like calling the Waymos to the protest and then setting the Waymos on fire. The Mexican flags flying here, that has become, something that a lot of the right have certainly seized upon. So wild images that you can see in the streets as protesters are clashing with. This is largely LAPD, even though the National Guard was brought in yesterday. My understanding is the National Guard mostly stayed around the federal building. Here, obviously, you can see these Waymos set on fire as well. And so while we continue to roll these images, I can just explain a little bit of how we got to this place. So the Trump administration, obviously, they ran on mass deportation. They have really upped the ante in recent days. Stephen Miller apparently went into an ICE meeting, was berating everybody for focusing on criminals and said, no, you need to go into the workplaces, go into the Home Depots. And that is exactly what ICE has been doing. So the initial protest kicked off at two locations in and near LA. You had a garment manufacturer where there was an ongoing ICE raid, and you had a Home Depot where ICE was massing, and there was an expectation that there would be a raid. You have migrants who hang out there in the parking lot looking for work, et cetera. So protests begin, and there's a pretty aggressive response from the LAPD, and you have large tensions in the community, and you have people that begin to throw rocks back, and it just escalates from here. Just watch this one clip. This is a reporter for Australian news outlet. And crazy footage here. You see one of the cops turn directly to her and fire a rubber bullet that hits her directly.
So you guys get the idea, right? This is what's going on here. And the National Guard was called in 2 days ago. And then it looks like they're going to be deploying some Marines to Los Angeles as well. So, Trump ran on law and order. He said that if anything like this was to ever happen, he would call the Marines in. And so I don't know how much you guys are aware of this, but it's not common for the military to be called in on domestic situations, right? With Americans, right? Usually the military is used internationally, not in the United States, right? So that is, obviously rare. In rare times, it does happen where you bring in, like the LA riots in the early 1990s. The military was brought in to try to quell what was happening there. So, there are a lot of questions around these quote unquote riots. And so what you saw there was mostly Waymo vehicles that they brought in. And why was Waymo targeted? So Waymo is a driverless vehicle taxi service, right? Where it's like the next evolution of Uber. If you wanted to order a car to take you to somewhere, you can order a Waymo vehicle. That Waymo vehicle can pick you up and take you to where you're going. Apparently, some of these people took issue with that taking jobs from people. And so that got thrown into the mix on this. Now, Peanut Butter Cup says, get all illegal aliens out of our country. Now, let's keep in mind that the people who came here, who in fact decided to call the United States of America, the United States of America, were illegal aliens themselves, right? They came and took land from people who were living here comfortably and peacefully, generally peacefully, for thousands of years, millions of years. And those Europeans that came here took that land, right? Remember that. So that's Peanut Butter Cup. Just keep that in mind. Number one. Number two, you have to remember that many of the situations where people are looking to leave the United States and come to the United States, to stay in the United States, the cause of them wanting to leave their countries in large part is from the United States. So for example, Libya is on the list of banned countries because they have terrorists. Now, do you understand that the United States is the reason why Libya is in the position it's in today? Because the United States actually overthrew Muammar Gaddafi, who was, not running Libya the way the United States wanted him to, but it was a thriving country. And they, the American government stepped in and assisted a coup that overthrew him and unceremoniously unalived him in public in a very brutal and disgusting way. Now their country is in chaos. It's where all the human trafficking happens through Africa. Iran is also on that list, if I'm not mistaken. The United States has been meddling in Iran for a long time too. The countries, Haiti is on that list. And it's interesting that all these countries are on the list that the United States had taken some part in overthrowing someone that they did not like and then destabilizing that country, but now telling those people they can't come to the country that destabilized their country. I find it ironic, interesting, important to call out, something to think about for all of you who think this idea of getting rid of all of our illegal aliens. So now people want to come to the United States for a better life. They don't always get a better life, right? But they do try to come to the United States for a better life. When they come to the U.S., especially people in the situation that we've been talking about over the last few months and seeking asylum. I spoke to somebody yesterday who is a translator for people who are seeking asylum. She's a translator for the Department of Homeland Security, or at least she deals with the Department of Homeland Security. And she was talking to me about how the processes work, right? And so you can apply for asylum from another country, get an asylum appointment, then come to the border to get that appointment. Or some people just go straight to the border and try to seek asylum. Now, if you apply outside the country, they allow you to enter the country and then you go through a process. If you show up at the border, they'll detain you and still allow you to go through that process. What happened in some cases is people were detained at the border who are applying for asylum and sent to El Salvador prison to that. So what is it? CICOT? It's called CICOT. The El Salvador prison, known for torturing and never allowing people out of, like, it's an unlimited prison sentence there. And that is because as soon as you enter the United States without a visa appointment, you technically are illegally here, which means you have broken the law. And the United States current administration believes that the best way to curb illegal entry is to do it the cruel way, to scare people, right? The idea is to get people to think, if I go there, that might happen to me, so I should not go there. That's their belief system. So there's a lot of comments. Let's get to them. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what is appropriate to post here. A lot of people have said a lot of things. So Johnny has said, and we're not desired in their own homes or lands. Yes, and I guess you're speaking about folks who are coming to America, maybe? I'm not sure. Can you be a little bit more descriptive? And by the way, I went to high school with Johnny. What's up, Johnny? I don't want people to get too involved in, going back and forth with each other in the comments. Help Me Out says an interesting thing. This is what Help Me Out says. You guys can read that out loud. And if you can't see it on screen, zoom in. I'm not going to read it, but yeah. So, I mean, that's an interesting viewpoint. I will say this, right? There's a concept of the Great Replacement Theory, right? Now, it was originally called the White Replacement Theory. And what that was is the idea that immigrants are coming to America and they're voting for politicians that are going to minimize and to reduce the power structure of people of European descent that live in the United States, right? That is one of the fears of the White Replacement Theory. They're going to change the culture of the country of the United States because in their opinion, the culture of the United States is Anglo-Saxon Christian culture, right? And that's what it should be. And that should be the only culture of the United States. Everybody else can just be in their own silos, but it shouldn't be the melting pot that has been described as America since they talked about American exceptionalism, right? In their minds, it should be homogenous and it should be Anglo-Saxon, European, Christian only values, right? So they become fearful of these other groups coming in and changing, quote unquote, their country, the way their country should be. So somebody like Trump obviously knows that his constituency believes that and sees that and fears that. And so he then made it a policy to focus on that. Now, there was the Lincoln Riley Act. Lincoln Riley was a young lady who was going to a university in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. She was on her way to class one day. She was attacked and SA'd by an illegal migrant. And the 911 call had him pick up the phone when she called 911 and said, like, I've taken you, or something like that in Spanish, right? So you have the 911 call. You have a victim who's Anglo-Saxon Christian, who falls into that category, who was SA'd by a migrant from Latin America, right? Who also, by the way, had a previous criminal record. So based on that criminal record, he should have been removed from the United States. And I think most people agree on that. So the Lincoln Riley Act was meant to potentially curb that potential issue. I don't think what most people understand who are following these things is most violent crime, especially in that style, happens from people who know the person who committed that act. It almost it very seldomly happens from a stranger. I know the stranger stories, because stranger danger and it's scary are the ones that generally are the ones that end up on the news. But the ones who really actually perpetrate these heinous crimes are generally Anglo-Saxon, European descent, Americans who know the person they perpetrated that crime to and on. It's just fact. And it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on, what you believe, what you don't believe, all numbers support that. In large numbers, that's the case. However, what's going to get the most support is if you go after people who don't look like you and who do something to someone who looks like you. And I mean that by those who are in the administration today. So Johnny was talking about those who stole our lands, meaning those Europeans who stole the lands from Africa. From Africans that were in America and Native Americans. The ones who stole the lands don't want you in their homes and in their countries. That is true. So it's interesting, right? So George K said CCOT is hell. This is really, really an interesting time in America. There was lots of talk before this recent election for president in the United States that there was a potential for like a civil war, right? And I'm not sure that I'm ready to say that that's about to happen or going to happen. I do think that it takes a lot for that to happen, but I do think we can expect more civil unrest. Excuse me. We can expect more civil unrest throughout the next 3+ years of this current administration, and if there are more administrations that follow in this same vein, because the way that they're going after people is one that is disruptive to everyone else's everyday lives, right? I think, look, I think everybody can agree if somebody is committing multiple crimes and it's proven that they're committing crimes and they are not from the country that they're committing the crimes in, I think most people would agree that that person should be removed and sent back to the country of origin, right? But if we're talking about folks that are looking to improve their lives and are improving American lives, right? That I think is something that, should be taken into consideration when determining who to go after, right? I mean, the way that they're going after these people with these raids, they're forcibly going into places and, they're approaching these people as if they committed crimes, many of whom are just people who overstayed a visa. Right? We're talking about people who've overstayed visas. That is the crime that they committed. And the way that they're going after them, it's an approach that you would expect to see for someone who actually committed crimes. So Cotton Top says, civil unrest by whom? It's a good question. So when I say civil unrest, I generally mean whenever there's a protest, there's either agitators, instigators, and or people with nothing better to do who add to the violence of these situations. These protests are largely, go on without a hitch, largely peaceful. There are just that 3% of people who may not even know what the protest is about, may not even be involved at all in the protest, but are there to be agitators. Now, there's all kinds of thoughts about who gives them money to be agitators. There's questions about how all these bricks and cement blocks end up at these places. There's a lot of questions about that. Even with January 6th, with everything that happened there, apparently there were FBI agents that were, in middle of investigations in the crowd and were actually around to watch everything, but did not help to stop it. So who knows where the civil unrest will come from, but it's anticipated that it will be there because there are going to be more and more people who are dissatisfied with what's happening. And as long as there's a large gathering, that gives the opportunity for those who are up to no good to go there and make issues happen. This is an interesting perspective. P. Rodusa said, Black people ignoring protests is why California happened. And you mean Los Angeles. So I think what you're trying to say is because it's not organized, right? There aren't any specific laws that they're looking to change, etc. What you found with, like, let's say George Floyd, whatever you believe about that, with Black Lives Matter, whatever you think about the organization, which it had some issues for sure. There were requests, there were specific processes that had gone through, many of which they had gotten, because so in America, you have the freedom of speech and assembly, right? That is the First Amendment to the entire Constitution of the United States, as you guys know. With that, though, you are generally supposed to get a permit to do the protesting. What you find is that a lot of times with these protests, if it's not organized, you don't get a permit first, that's a problem. Or if you get a permit, it is to stay in a specific area, right? There is a specific jurisdiction area that you can be in once you get that permit, and people sometimes move on beyond that. And so that's what causes some of these challenges. But back to that point, I do think that there should have been better organization. So for example, somebody said this to me yesterday, and I think that was really smart. So she's someone who I think generally supports the American administration. She's a Latino person. And I'm presuming that only because of the discussion that we had and her sources of news, because I walked into a place where she was listening to a particular podcast. But she said something that was really smart. She said, if you guys are going to do this, you should take the bullhorn, turn it towards Home Depot, and say to them, here are your rights if you are detained. Here's what you need to do in order to ensure that you can continue to be here, etc. Instead, what we found was mostly focusing the efforts on the National Guard, the upsetness that the National Guard is coming in, protesting in front of the police. And what we haven't gotten is any one or two representatives to come out and say, here is what we are protesting for. Here's what we're looking to change. Here's what we need to see differently. And that, of course, gives more reason for the Trump administration and now the military and the National Guard and the police, the LAPD, to forcibly push back against protesters and some of those who are bringing in the civil unrest. So, look, somebody says, we must put ourselves in their shoes. If it were us, we would want mercy. Yeah, look, I mean, my parents migrated to the United States. They went through the proper channels to become citizens. I know how difficult it was for them in this country. And I know, we had a family friend. Prior to ICE, there was another organization. I can't remember what it was called before ICE. But he had overstayed a visa. He was here on I don't know if it was a student visa, what visa it was, but this is under the Bush administration. And he had children here in the United States. He had married a French national. She was also from Ivory Coast. They're Ivorian. She was also from the Ivory Coast, but she also had French citizenship. And so, but they were living here in the United States. And they kicked in the door and arrested him. And, and it was not like a peaceful arrest. I mean, it wasn't like, hello, is this person here? We'd like to speak to him. It was like kicking the door. They had a warrant, gripped him up, put him in cuffs. Obviously it's a core memory for the children. It was shocking to the children, lots of tears, screaming, crying, the whole thing. Within 3 days, he was on his way to Ivory Coast. Now he lives in Germany, and between Germany and France, and he's working there. And he goes to see his family in Germany. The family is in Germany. The children born in the United States are able to come back to the U.S. and because they have birthright citizenship, so they can come back to the United States, go to school, all that kind of stuff. But it was a traumatic experience, and so I remember hearing about that. I was probably about 21 or 20 years old. I was younger than that. This happened. Yeah, I was probably like 20 or 19 years old when I heard about this, and my initial thought was, well, he overstayed his visa, but the way they did it, I thought was aggressive. Now, that was at a different time when you had somebody like Bush, who at the very least understood that a lot of his, with the Rangers and stuff, that national park was built by Mexicans. So, he took an approach that was really more about, it was like with everything pertaining to September 11th and everything beyond that, right? So they were really aggressive during that time. In this particular administration, it seems that, using the Alien Enemies Act, othering these migrants, trying to dehumanize them, makes it easier to be cruel to them. It just does, right? If you feel like somebody is less than, they're other, if they're, committing SA and violent crime, if that's the way they're described, it makes it easier for them to approach it the way they're approaching it, right? That's just what it is, Let's see if there's any other comments or thoughts. So this is about the visa. So Mustafa says, my Sierra Leone wife trying to get a visa to visit me in America. Do you think she'll be able to? That's a no, sir. Sorry, Mustafa. She is not going to get a visa to visit you in the United States. You may be able to apply for citizenship for her. Well, actually, you know what? They were saying that some visas might be, go back and watch my live stream from yesterday about Sierra Leone in particular, because you may be okay. But from what I understand, they're not really issuing visas right now in general. They are saying that certain visas are going to be accepted. But once you have a restriction on your country and it's been black and white like that, it's going to be very hard for her to get a visa, if I'm being honest with you. I just think I would anticipate it's unlikely that that visa will be issued to her. Just being real with you. George K says some people abuse their tourist visa. They stay longer than the time required. Yes, that is what the argument is of the administration today, is that, people overstay their visas. I think it was 15% in Sierra Leone overstay their tourist visas, Sierra Leonean migrants to America. So, that's their belief system. And that is why they determined that it makes sense for them to, not to allow them into the country. Let's see if there's, so always a lady says, this is a deflection of the Trump-Musk breakup. I don't know if it's a deflection. I mean, at the end of the day, the protests were already planned. So this is a response to the protests. The Trump-Musk breakup, I don't think it's a distraction or a deflection, because at the end of the day, they both did it publicly. If they wanted to hide it, they wouldn't do it publicly, right? I mean, but they're talking about having a meeting about it. But I understand what you're saying. I think a lot of times people feel like certain things like this end up being a distraction from the main point. It's like a sleight of hand, like watch this hand so you don't see what this other hand is doing. Yeah, I mean, that can be in many cases. I'm not sure that's what this was. I think they're saying Musk was threatened to be deported to South Africa. Yeah, I think that's what Steve Bannon has been saying. I do not think Trump will deport Musk to South Africa. It's unlikely. It's unlikely. Anything's possible, but I think it's unlikely. I think that they're going to kiss and make up before too long. Always Lady 510 says this is force and fear. Exactly. They use fear. African-American versus African immigrants. This is slowly looking like a movie Civil War. Well, I don't know if the African-American versus African immigrants issue is one that is what we're talking about here. That's a whole nother conversation for somewhere else. Always a lady 510 says everyone but the natives are immigrants. That is correct. I agree with you on that. Cause instability and then block them. So that's just speaking to what I said about what's been happening in Latin America and many of these countries. You cause instability in that country, but then you block them and from allowing them to come into your country, I think is wild. So I got some more footage of the protests and what was happening in Los Angeles. I'll play a little bit of that for you guys because I don't know how many of you guys were aware of what was happening. I will tell you that what's on the news looks worse than what it has been. I mean, look, they're obviously all in one area, but again, I am about a 10-minute walk away from there, 2 minutes drive, and I can't even hear it right now. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. The BET Awards is today. In fact, they're starting to seat people in about 1 hour. And as of right now, it doesn't seem to be disrupting anything they're doing. I mean, my hotel I'm staying in right now is full of people who are going to BET Awards. So, and people who are here for the BET festivities. So it seems as though that's going on without a hitch. But anyway, let's watch some of this video and I'll give you some thoughts on the other side.
Demonstrators are making their way down the ramp and onto the 101 freeway. This is, I think, a concern that we had seen a little earlier. The freeway had been shut down by law enforcement, and it is now being shut down by the other side. Demonstrators are on the surface of the southbound 101 freeway and blocking traffic. I believe that's the southbound 101 freeway is shut down. Demonstrators are on the roadway surface. The northbound still seems to be making its way through, though certainly not at speed. And as we pan up, we see large crowds gathered at the top of that off-ramp.
Earlier this morning, apparently a raid by ICE here at a business called Ambiance. Then a crowd started forming outside the perimeter. They started actually surrounding these buildings.
We have a piece of video. You can see that they've gotten the people and they put them in these vans. It was a very strange sight to see because they started to leave and there were people who were protesting, trying to keep these vans from getting out. And the video seen here is deeply troubling because these officers, look, there's that person in front. And the officers did not stop, these agents or whatever federal authorities they were. And notice how this person continued to stay in front. And the officer did not slow. No officer came out and tried to get this out. And then watch as the person in front falls and hits his head on the ground. And that just seemed like it was an injury. But then these agents then moved aside and then immediately took off. And we watched these agents almost as if it was a chase. They got together in the caravan and we watched as those agents.
So you guys can see that's what started the protest, right? So there wasn't an organization beforehand to do it. They just went to where this was happening. And then other things started to move and to happen. But yeah, so that's how we got it. That's how we got here. I mean, it is something that we'll continue to follow, and we'll continue to talk through the implications of some of these changes in immigration policy. Well, it's actually continued immigration policy from the Trump administration, but changes in American immigration policy. Because at the end of the day, what now is American policy is maybe not necessarily going to always be American policy. It may not be, but that's what the policy is today. I did want to show the impact of visa restrictions and how much people have paid for visas in the last few years. Let me see if I can find something that shows you this, because I thought it was really interesting to look at this. I was looking at this and I thought to myself, so much money is made through this visa racket. It is wild how much people spend to get visas, and they're just completely ignored, right? And I'm going to share with you this in one moment. I just need to show how much money goes into trying to get these visas and the restrictions, because I think it's important. Now, this isn't specific to the United States. This is going to be more specific to the EU. But I think it's a good place to kind of watch and see how much money has been lost by these folks. So let me pull this up on screen really quickly, because this is something that I thought was useful and helpful. So, most folks, so here we go. Let's put that up on the screen. So to the EU, estimated cost of rejection. So what that means is you pay for the visa, but you do not get issued a visa. $4.3 million for Nigeria in terms of visa restrictions. 2.8 all the way down to 390,000. So that's euros, not dollars. So you can almost double that to get dollars. So this is per year. So it's top 10 African countries with the most money lost to EU visa restrictions. Every year, thousands apply, but many get rejected. The fees are non-refundable, and it adds up. Millions lost, no visa, no refund. Look at that. Look at that. I mean, does that seem okay to you guys? You guys let me know. You guys let me know if you're okay with what you see there. Oh, here's another thing. I forgot to mention this. Kabi Lame, the guy who does those the videos where he points at stuff. He was detained by ICE in Las Vegas after he quote unquote overstayed his visa. Immigration agents later allowed him to voluntarily leave, and he has since departed the United States. So we're talking about this guy, right? Who was just at the Met Gala just a couple of weeks ago. This guy who was the #1 TikToker, right? He's known for, this style of video. Yeah, that guy. He was detained by ICE for overstaying his visa. So, yeah, I mean, look, that's just really what it is. I mean, you just know that this is going to continue to happen. There was more that I wanted to show, but it seems as if I was unable to get the post that I wanted to share with you all. There's a lot of content that I have been sending to myself to discuss this particular topic and more. But you know what? We'll leave it at that. I mean, it's been a long enough live stream. We got tons of comments, and I appreciate you guys all engaging. I don't know if there's any final words and thoughts that anybody has. I don't know. I think that it's time. I saw a YouTube video where they discriminate, and they said to speak Creole and they're not from the country and they get money and have better car than someone else. I'm not really sure. George K is talking about something. I'm not sure. But he must be talking about some channel. I don't know what he's talking about. So to be clear, for those who are watching and who are reading the comments, I don't know if George K, are you speaking about this channel? Let's address this. First of all, let's address this before we go, because I don't want anybody who's reading this who are new to the channel to see this and understand it. George K, are you speaking about my channel in particular? So because George K put this up, he said, this channel is example of hate of African American. Oh, okay, that channel, specific Minister Jap Network. Okay, I don't know about that channel. I'm not prepared. I'm not aware of that channel. So we won't talk about that channel. I'm not aware of that channel. I don't know what they're up to. I thought you were talking about this particular channel, but you were talking about that channel. Got it. All right, no problem. Okay, so look, guys, I want to thank you guys all for watching and staying on this long. If you found this useful, make sure you share this with anybody you know who's trying to figure out what is going on with these African visa bans and restrictions. If you know anybody who wants to know what is going on with the the LA, what they're calling the new LA riots here and what's happening here, you can share this with them. I will keep you guys posted. Next week, we'll probably talk about this a bit. If I'm not mistaken, next week or the week after, I do have an interview that I'm going to be doing with somebody who's doing some incredible stuff on the continent, and I want to get her story in front of all of you guys. So stay tuned for that. More to come on that. We have no more live streams. Oh, we have one more live stream this week. Tomorrow, we will have This Month in Africa with African Stream and Enem Richardson, and we are going to do a deep dive into Ibrahim Traore, what he's been up to, what has he done, what are the accusations against him, what are people saying he's done well from people on the ground and from firsthand accounts. So stay tuned for that if you want to hear more about what Traore has been up to and what he's been accused of, because it is really interesting, and we're going to talk about all of it then. So with that, guys, I want to say thank you for watching. I will see you all on the next video. Okay, the stream doesn't want to end. Okay, I'm trying to end the stream. Sorry, guys. I know it looks like I'm like frozen or I'm not moving, but